The war ended, but the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that feels like holding your breath underwater, waiting, knowing something still lurks below. Some called it a victory. They raised flags and gave speeches, carved names into stone. But to most of us it didn't feel like we won. It felt like something had been torn out of us and buried in the dirt with the dead. And the worst part? They expected us to forgive. The galaxy moved on. Treaties were signed. Smiles were forced. The same diplomats who once urged caution now talked about rebuilding, trade routes, alliances. They said things like, the future depends on unity, and we must let go of the past. But none of them saw what we saw. None of them heard the cries that echoed in burning cities, or watched families crumble under orbital fire. And none of them were there when Earth fell quiet. We remember. The humans who survived didn't sit back and heal. We didn't forget the betrayals. The broken promises. The allies who turned their backs when the enemy ships arrived. They had sworn to protect. They had stood beside us in council chambers, shaking hands and making deals. But when the sky burned red, they looked the other way. Some even sold us out. That's not the kind of thing humanity forgives. There was a time we wanted to be part of something bigger. A galactic community, they called it. Civilized species working together in peace. We believed in that. Gave it everything. Shared our technology. Sent our best minds off-world. Opened our borders. Trusted. And we paid the price for that trust. We sent out a message after the war. Not to plead. Not to beg. Just a simple signal, short, cold, final. Humanity will no longer forget. Or forgive. The galaxy laughed at first. Thought we were licking our wounds. Thought we'd fade away like so many others had before. But we didn't. We rebuilt. Quietly. Ruthlessly. We stopped asking for help. We stopped offering it too. They didn't notice the silence growing at first. They were too busy pretending everything was fine. But we watched. We waited. And we remembered who turned away. The first to feel our return were the merchants from Viral Prime. They'd made a fortune selling surplus weapons during the war, mostly to our enemies. They thought the past was buried. Thought a deal was just a deal. Their trade routes vanished overnight. Ships went missing in deep space. No signals. No distress calls. Just silence. They blamed pirates. Sent search parties. None came back. They sent an envoy to Earth. Offered reparations. Spoke about peace. We never answered. Some say that's when the galaxy started to worry. But it wasn't until the incident on Traylon Station that they understood what we'd become. The station was neutral. A hub for diplomats, travelers, scientists. No weapons allowed. That's what they all said. But when the doors opened and the humans stepped off the shuttle, cold-eyed, silent, nobody stopped them. They didn't fire a shot. They didn't have to. Everyone just moved aside. They walked straight to the representative who had once called Earth's plea for aid a distraction from more important matters. He tried to run. He didn't make it. They left him alive. Barely. He's still breathing. But he doesn't speak anymore. After that, the council sent a message. An invitation. A summit. Let's talk, they said. Let's make things right. They don't get it. It's too late for that. We're not angry anymore. We're focused. We're patient. We're coming. Some humans still argue for peace. Still think there's a path back to what we once had. They hold meetings. Start petitions. They talk about forgiveness like it's strength. But most of us know better. Forgiveness is what they used against us. Made us soft. Made us weak. Now we remember the cost. And we're not going to pay it again. The child who watched her parents die under alien bombardment, she doesn't want forgiveness. She wants justice. The soldier who held the line while reinforcements never came, he doesn't want peace. He wants the truth to be known. The mother who lost her son because someone deemed Earth strategically insignificant, she wants them to feel it. Every decision we make now is quiet, clean, precise. No grand declarations. No fiery speeches. Just actions. They taught us that. They showed us how diplomacy really works. How power moves in shadows. How to wait. How to strike without warning. They made us what we are now. We were human before. Now we're something else. We still look the same. We still smile in the council halls. Still wear the uniforms. Still shake hands. But underneath it all there's steel. And memory. They thought we'd forget. They were wrong. And one by one the reminders are coming. A communications hub on the outer rim goes dark. Blamed on solar flares. A defense satellite spins out of control. Faulty software. A convoy carrying military supplies disappears. Pirates, they say again. But the pirates aren't talking. Because they're not alive. Somewhere deep in the asteroid fields, a team of human operatives listens to intercepted messages. Tracks movement. Plans the next step. No names. No glory. Just precision. They don't act out of rage. They act out of principle. Out of memory. Because forgiveness was offered once. And it was thrown back in our faces. Now there's no going back. We're not monsters. We don't destroy for pleasure. We don't burn worlds. But we don't forget. And when we come with purpose. Not for revenge. For justice. For remembrance. For every child buried in a cratered city. For every broken promise. For every ally who turned away. There's a ship drifting near the edge of known space. No transponder. No beacon. Just metal and silence. It wasn't built for comfort. No crew quarters. No name painted on the hull. Only one room matters. The one with the long table and the screens that light up with every new report. A man sits there, hands folded, watching. Not giving orders. Just listening. He's not important by name. Not a leader. Not a hero. Just one of many. But he remembers. And that's enough. Because somewhere in the stars, the ones who betrayed us are still laughing. Still pretending they did nothing wrong. Still thinking they got away with it. But we're not coming to punish. We're coming to remind. That's worse. And it's already begun. The only question left is, who remembers first? And who forgets last? Because in the end, that's all it comes down to. Memory. And ours is long. The war ended. But we didn't. And now they're starting to realize. Humanity forgives nothing. Not anymore. Not ever again. The signal had no source, no trail. It just appeared, quiet, sharp, and full of meaning. A single burst through secure channels, repeating every hour on the hour. Echelon 7 is active. No one in the wider galaxy knew what it meant. But every human asset still in the field, every sleeper cell buried under fake names and forgotten stations, understood. It was a wake-up call. Somewhere on a lifeless rock orbiting a red dwarf, a woman blinked to life. She wasn't asleep in the normal sense. She'd been living as someone else, working on a civilian cargo crew, blending in. For 6 years she loaded containers, played cards with aliens who barely remembered the war, and smiled like it didn't weigh on her. But she remembered the fire raining down. She remembered her brother's voice cracking through the static, then cutting off. That moment had never left her. Not even once. Now the moment had come. She walked off the job without a word, left her ID on the table, and boarded a vessel that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't registered on any system. No questions were asked. Just a silent nod from the pilot, and the ship disappeared into the black. Thousands like her moved at once. Across space, in the cracks between systems, shadows stirred. Echelon 7 meant preparation was over. The second phase was beginning. Still, most of the galaxy slept soundly. In the central systems, life looked normal. Trade moved. Councils argued. News cycles kept spinning. They talked about reconstruction. Resources. Planetary growth. The usual. But in quiet corners, observation posts, outposts clinging to the edges of asteroid belts, some started noticing patterns. Missing data. Sensor ghosts. Unexplained shutdowns. Nothing overt, but just enough to make the smart ones nervous. One such observer was stationed on Rilon's Edge, a station technically owned by a mining guild but rarely visited. She was half human, half something else, and she never talked about the war. Her father had died in it, though, and her mother never forgave either side. She picked up the signal on her personal rig. Not an official alert, just an anomaly. It was almost buried under system noise, but it had a rhythm. Patterns like that didn't happen by chance. She ran the audio backward, changed the encoding, filtered it through old Earth algorithms. Echelon 7 is active. She leaned back, heart pounding. She hadn't heard those words since she was a child. Since her father whispered them to her before sending her and her mother into hiding. And now the phrase was back. She didn't report it. Not yet. She watched the stars instead and wondered if humanity was really done being silent. Meanwhile, on an industrial moon orbiting a gas giant, another piece moved. A human man, older now, face hardened by loss and years of pretending, received a package with no label. Inside was a knife. No note. No explanation. Just the same blade he had used during the siege of Tauros 9 years ago. He held it in shaking hands for a moment. Then he got up and emptied his safe. Burned the fake credentials. Opened a hidden panel behind the floor. Inside, wrapped in a black cloth, was a transmitter. He hadn't used it in a decade. Now he turned it on. One short message. I'm back. There were no medals for people like him. No public stories. He'd been erased by his own people after the war, buried deep to keep the political lies intact. But he hadn't forgotten. And now someone else hadn't either. He left that night. The gas giant's ring spun above him as the transport ship climbed, but he didn't look back. He had work to do. Far away in the core worlds where luxury floated above truth, the council remained blind. They debated new alliances. Discussed trade with species who once denied Earth even basic protection. One counselor, human by blood but distant by choice, noticed something off. Reports on human colonies growing quieter. Civilian science outposts requesting fewer supplies. Ship logs redacted by unknown parties. He brought it up. Gently. The others dismissed it. Earth's just isolating again, one said with a soft laugh. They do this every few cycles. They'll come around, said another. They always do. We just have to give them time. But time wasn't something humanity was offering anymore. Because while the council sat in circles, humans were moving like lines, sharp, fast, focused. The black site orbiting a brown dwarf had no name. No registry. Not even lights on its hull. Inside, deep below layers of shielding, a room pulsed with life. People gathered. Not soldiers in uniform. Not politicians. They were something else now. Forged by loss. Hardened by betrayal. Each one had a scar, physical or otherwise. Each one had a reason. They didn't speak often. When they did, it was short, precise, clear. A map lit up in the center of the room. Red dots marked the betrayals. Where help never came. Where friends became enemies. Where human lives were weighed against convenience, and lost. There were a lot of red dots. Too many. No one asked what to do next. They already knew. Above them, ships began to stir. Not massive warships. Not fleets designed for show. These were small, fast, and built with purpose. And every one of them carried a single phrase etched into the hull where only the crew would see it. Asterisk, we remember. Asterisk. Somewhere else, a human farmer on a distant world, once a refugee now barely scraping by, received a visitor. The man at the door didn't smile. Just held out a badge with a symbol the farmer hadn't seen since he was a boy. You were at Eldrin Pass, the man said. The farmer nodded slowly. His hands clenched at his sides. We need you again, the man said. The farmer looked at the soil, then at the horizon. He'd buried his past under years of work, pain, silence. But the past was rising. And it was calling his name. He didn't ask questions. Just walked into his home, packed a small bag and left without saying goodbye. The story was repeating. But this time humanity would write the ending. Elsewhere, a teacher on a colony moon noticed something strange in her class. The human children had stopped drawing stars. Stopped painting alien cities and peace banners. Now they drew shields. Hidden bases. Ships in silence. And one word over and over, remember. She asked where they heard it. They didn't say. But she could see it in their eyes. They knew. Somehow they all knew. The silence wasn't peace anymore. It was a drumbeat. Quiet, steady building. The galaxy kept spinning, thinking Earth had turned its back on them. But Earth hadn't turned away. It had turned inward. Had looked at its wounds. Its dead. Its lies. And it had changed. Now it was coming back into the light. Not with banners but with shadows. Not with speeches but with precision. And those who thought they had buried the past were about to learn what it means when a species with nothing left to lose remembers everything. Because this wasn't a new war. This was something colder. Sharper. Quieter. It wasn't about territory or pride. It was about accountability. About making sure the ones who smiled during humanity's pain knew they hadn't escaped it. Not really. Not forever. And somewhere out in the dark, a ship activated for the first time in years. Its systems flickered to life. Its AI checked dormant codes. Its engines whispered in the void. The captain stepped aboard, not in uniform but wearing something older, a relic from the first days of the war. A memory stitched into fabric. He didn't speak to his crew. They didn't need him to. They knew the mission. They knew the history. They carried it with them like fire. And as the ship slipped into the darkness between systems, a simple phrase appeared on its comms log. 3 words. It begins now. But no one saw it. Not yet. Because this time humanity wasn't announcing itself. It wasn't asking for space at the table. It was flipping the table over. Quietly. Cleanly. And piece by piece, those who had watched Earth burn were about to understand. The war may have ended. But humanity hadn't. Not even close. They just stopped talking. and started listening. And soon someone would speak. One voice. One broadcast. One moment. It wasn't time yet. But it was close. Close enough to taste. And when it came, the whole galaxy would hear it. Because some things can be forgiven. But not this. Never this. Never again. The signal never reached the screens. It was timed down to the millisecond, lined up with every atmospheric relay, patched through redundant channels built just for this one moment. But when the order was given and the technician on the hidden ship pressed the final sequence, nothing happened. No flash. No broadcast. Just silence. He tried again. Hard reset. Cleared all firewalls. Manual override. Still nothing. They all stood there, frozen, not with panic, yet, but confusion. Then unease. Then a slow, cold understanding. "We've been blocked," someone said. The screen in front of them shimmered for a split second, like a ripple underwater. Then it cleared and something else came through. It wasn't from Earth. It wasn't even from the station below. It was from somewhere deeper. The voice was calm. Cold. Not synthesized, but practiced. "You waited too long," it said. "We knew you would try this. We watched you crawl back from the ashes. We calculated every move." On screen, a figure stepped into view. The lighting was low, casting shadows where a face should be. No name. No insignia. Just presence. "We never planned to erase you," the voice continued. "We needed you to remember. Because a cornered species fights harder. But now you're something worse. You think you have control." The crew didn't speak. Didn't move. The feed wasn't just hijacked. It was personalized. Targeted. Someone knew their locations. Their faces. Their plans. Then the screen cut to static. They all turned to the commander. His jaw was tight. Eyes locked to the dark. "They're not just scared anymore," he said. "They're ready." "Ready for what?" someone whispered. And the answer was obvious. Not just to defend themselves. To counterstrike. They had let humanity simmer, thinking the ghosts of the past would be enough to burn the foundations of the galaxy. But now they were going to try and bury those ghosts for good. And they'd built a weapon to do it. Not a gun. Not a fleet. But a story. A new one. False documents. Edited history. Simulated footage. And an entire communications network that had already begun replacing the truth with something more useful. Cleaner. Easier to sell. The version where humanity had caused the war. Had refused help. Had chosen isolation. And worst of all, it was working. Reports started flooding in from outer colonies. Human trade partners canceling deals. Political blocs reinstated. Even Earth's own scattered allies pulling away, claiming new information, new revelations. It was the oldest weapon in the book. Rewrite the truth. Undo the memory. And the worst part? Most wouldn't question it. They were tired. They didn't want another reckoning. They wanted closure, even if it was false. The hidden crew stared at the data feeds. "What do we do?" the younger woman asked. Her voice cracked slightly, not with fear, but exhaustion. The commander looked at the old map, at the points where they had once felt like they were winning. "This isn't about revenge anymore," he said. "It's about survival." They had planned for almost everything. But not for the erasure of truth itself. Somewhere near the core systems, a convoy carrying the original files, the untouched evidence, was moving without escort. Quiet. Hidden in standard freight routes. They were trying to preserve it. Archive it somewhere even their enemies couldn't twist. But that convoy had just gone dark. No signals. No distress beacons. No debris. Gone. And that, more than anything else, meant time was up. The enemy wasn't just rewriting the past. They were eliminating it entirely. It wasn't about who had died. Or who had stood by. It was about whether any of it would matter when the final record was written. The ship powered up. No more slow strikes. No more patient messages. This had to be stopped now, or the last chance to remember would vanish. But as they prepared to move, another message came through. A weak signal. Glitching. Barely readable. But human. An old signal code, one used back during the war by deep recon teams. They boosted it. Cleaned the interference. And then the voice came through. Shaky. Breathing hard. But alive. "We have the convoy. We diverted it. We couldn't trust the route." Everyone on the bridge froze. "Identity?" the tech asked, fingers dancing over the console. The signal continued. "This is Echo Black. We found something. In the archives. Deeper than expected." There was a pause. "It's not just lies. They've built something. Buried it under a mining ring near Theta 9. Not just data, hardware. A machine. We don't know what it does yet. But the energy readings, they're wrong. The voice cracked with static again, then cut out. They stared at each other. Theta 9. It was an old battlefield. A graveyard of ships from all sides. No one went near it anymore. Too much debris. Too much pain. But now, the commander nodded slowly. They're not trying to erase us, he said. They're preparing for something new. Something built on the lie. And suddenly it was clear. This wasn't just about memory. It was about control. If the truth was wiped away, and a new history was installed, then any weapon, any system, any act done in the name of that rewritten truth would be justified. Even genocide. Even extinction. And this time they wouldn't wait for humanity to fight back. They'd erase the reason for the fight before it began. As they set course for Theta 9, the old war scars burned hot again. Not from rage, but something deeper. A knowing that this wasn't over. That humanity would have to fight again, not to punish the galaxy, but to remind it of what silence costs, of what forgetting can create, of what it means to survive, not just in body but in story. Because the war had ended. But forgiveness? That had never been given. And now, with the stars shifting above them and ghosts moving below, they had to face the truth. It might never be. The debris field around Theta 9 was thicker than anyone remembered. Old ships drifted like broken bones across the dark, hulls cracked open and bleeding frozen memories. The echoes of the last war were still there, shattered flags, burn marks on steel, emergency beacons that had long since gone silent. But beneath all that wreckage was something new. The scans came in slower than expected, jammed intermittently by an invisible pulse. It wasn't enough to shut them down completely, just enough to make them doubt what they were seeing. But the core reading was clear. The machine was real. Buried deep in the hollowed-out asteroid once used for mining, camouflaged with outdated tech and radiation traps. And it was alive. Powered. Quiet. But alive. They couldn't risk a full team. The radiation spikes were climbing, and the longer they lingered, the more they risked detection. So the commander went down alone. Suit sealed. Weapons low profile. Just a tracker pinging every 30 seconds so the crew knew he was still breathing. He moved through the corridors of the abandoned mining rig like walking through a corpse. Rusted railings. Flickering lights. Dust that hadn't been touched in years. Then he saw it. The door at the end wasn't rusted. It was clean. Maintained. Whatever was inside wasn't just left behind. It had been protected. He entered. The room was cold. Large. More like a tomb than a lab. And at the center of it, a single chair. Not a throne. Not a control panel. Just a chair. And a person sitting in it. They were still. Eyes closed. Breathing steady. Wires ran from the base of the skull down into the floor. The commander didn't speak at first. Just watched. Then he stepped closer. The person opened their eyes. Human. But not fully. The eyes glowed faintly, not from technology, but memory. Like the past was still alive inside them, burning slow and quiet. You're not supposed to be here, the figure said softly. The commander didn't lift his weapon. Neither are you. The figure smiled. Not cruelly. Just sad. I volunteered, they said. After the war. I thought it would stop more blood. What is this place? The commander asked. The figure didn't answer right away. Then they said, a recorder. A translator. A storyteller. And suddenly the commander understood. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was worse. It was a mind. One built to absorb everything. Every voice. Every detail. Every part of the war. Filtered, edited, and then retold. Not with honesty, but with intent. This person, they had been turned into a living narrative engine. A being whose memories had been hijacked, reshaped, and used to build the new version of history. They said it was peace, the figure whispered. They said if I gave them my memories they could unify the story. And the fighting. Keep everyone together. The commander stepped closer. And? They cut out the parts they didn't like. And what's left is a lie. The machine under the floor rumbled softly. They're broadcasting it now. Through me. Across the sectors. That's why no one's listening anymore. It's not that they don't believe us. It's that they don't hear us at all. The commander looked around. The walls were covered in recordings. Projectors. Memory tapes. And among them, fragments. His own voice. Voices from ships long gone. Bits of humanity scraped together and warped. They said I was saving lives, the figure said again. But I think I just made it easier for them to forget what they did. The commander swallowed. There was pain in his chest. Not from fear. From recognition. He'd seen this before. Not this machine. But what it did. He'd seen it in the way survivors stopped talking about the war. The way old allies turned their backs. The way pain became inconvenience. Forgetfulness wasn't an accident. It was design. He knelt down beside the figure. "You can stop it," he said. The figure looked at him, and for a moment their eyes flickered. Something human pushed through. "I don't remember my own name," they said. "You don't need to," the commander replied. "Just remember the truth." Silence stretched between them. Then the figure nodded once, barely a motion. And then everything shook. Alarms screamed through the asteroid. On the ship above, the crew shouted over each other as energy readings spiked. "The broadcast's collapsing," someone yelled. "He's doing it." But then a second reading came in. Something else had just powered up inside the asteroid. Bigger. Not human. Below, the floor panels split open. A second structure rose, circular, mechanical, and humming with heat. It hadn't been broadcasting lies. It had been absorbing. Preparing. The story wasn't just meant to be rewritten, it was meant to replace. A synthetic consciousness. Built from the edited memories. Trained to think like humanity. Speak like them. Act like them. So that, when the time came, it could be them. The final twist of the knife. A digital species crafted from sanitized history, designed to inherit humanity's place without its scars. Without its fire. The commander turned back to the figure in the chair. "They're replacing us," he said. The figure nodded. "But not yet." And then, with a shaking breath, they pulled the wires from their head. Screams ripped through the systems as the connection shattered. Lights blew. The machine behind them convulsed. Above, the ship lurched. "The signal's crashing," someone shouted. "All data nodes are disconnecting." The machine groaned below like a dying god. The commander caught the figure as they collapsed, their body trembling. "You stopped it," he said. "No," the figure whispered. "You did. You remembered." He carried them out as the walls fell inward. As the memory machine sparked and burst. As the rewritten history burned away. But just before they escaped, the sensors caught one last signal. A backup. Hidden. And already transmitting somewhere else. The lies weren't dead. Just scattered. And as the commander stared out into the dark, he knew the war wasn't over. Not really. Because the worst part about forgetting wasn't the silence. It was the moment when the lie becomes easier to believe than the truth. And out there, somewhere, something still believed it. Still waited. Still whispered a story that wasn't theirs. But it would be. Unless someone stood up again. Unless humanity kept remembering. Because the war had ended. But the fight to be remembered, that had only just begun. The silence after the collapse felt different. Not the cold, empty kind. This one felt heavy. Like something had shifted that couldn't be undone. The asteroid was falling apart behind them, fragments drifting slowly into the void as the engines of the ship strained to escape the debris field. Below, that machine, that mimic, was gone. Buried with the stories it tried to replace. But not all of it. The commander sat in the quiet of the medbay. The figure they rescued from the machine's core was resting, barely alive but stable. The doc said their nervous system had been pushed past what any human should have survived. But even now, even unconscious, their hands twitched sometimes. Like they were still reaching for something. The crew had questions. So did command. So did the rest of the human frontier. But for now, no answers came. Not the ones they wanted. The commander stared at the cracked recording device in his hands, the one they pulled from the wall in that memory chamber. Burned, scorched, still warm. Inside, it held a piece of the original voice, raw and untouched. Not broadcasted. Not cleaned. Real. The voice inside it spoke of fear, anger, hope, shame. All the things the machine had tried to erase. All the things that made them human. He uploaded it to the relay system himself. Didn't send it to a press outlet. Didn't give it to a diplomat. Just put it out raw into the civilian networks. Let people hear it for what it was. The reaction wasn't instant. But it was real. Across the colonies, people stopped. Some wept. Some raged. But most just listened. And for the first time in years, they heard something that didn't sound like politics. Didn't sound like sanitized propaganda. It sounded like someone who'd survived. A human voice. The crew didn't return to base right away. The commander insisted they make one more stop. He didn't explain why. Just gave coordinates. It was a planet long abandoned. Once a battleground, then a graveyard. Now just dust and ash. But under it, buried in what used to be a bunker, there was another cache. This one untouched. No broadcasts. No machines. Just relics, journals, video logs, writings scratched into walls. Some were from soldiers, some from refugees. One was from a child, no more than 8, writing in the dirt with a burned stick. It said, "Don't let them forget us." The crew stood in silence as the commander packed the cash. Not for archives, not for museums, but to be shared, openly, freely. Some asked why it mattered. The war was over. The treaties signed. The new order in place. He looked at them and simply said, "If we let someone else tell our story, they'll tell the version that suits them. Not the one that cost us blood." The journey back took weeks. During that time, more voices began surfacing. People who'd been quiet since the ceasefire. People who'd lost family, lost faith. They spoke up. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. But for truth. The backup signal from the machine was never found. At least not directly. Some claimed to hear strange transmissions in the outer rings. Others dismissed it as paranoia. But the commander knew better. That voice, that copy was still out there somewhere. Waiting. Quiet. Maybe rebuilding. But it wouldn't find the same silence anymore. Because now humanity was listening. Every corner of space that humans touched, they began to carve new memory holes. Stations with raw accounts. Not filtered. Not framed. Just spoken, recorded, and left for anyone to hear. Children listened to them in classrooms. Veterans left their own pieces beside the old ones. Even the broken, half-garbled logs meant something. Because they were real. And slowly, the narrative that had almost replaced them began to weaken. The commander never became famous. He didn't want that. He didn't trust it. But the figure he rescued, they did recover. Not fully. Some things were lost forever. But they remembered a few things. Flashes of laughter. A sibling's voice. The sound of rain. They lived quietly on a small orbital. They never asked for anything. But they wrote. Every day. Longhand. Paper and ink. When asked why, they simply said, "Machines forget too easily." Years passed. The scars of the war never truly vanished, but they became part of something larger. Not shame. Not pride. Just memory. The human story had always been messy. Loud. Imperfect. But it was theirs. And when the new generation came, kids who never saw the war, never felt the fire, they learned not just the what, but the why. They learned about the mistakes. The betrayal. The forgiveness withheld. They asked questions. And humanity answered them. Not with perfect clarity, but with honesty. That was enough. Because in the end, the greatest strength humanity ever had wasn't its ships, or its weapons, or even its defiance. It was memory. Flawed. Painful. But real. The voice from the machine faded into history. Maybe it still whispered somewhere, clinging to the shadows of broken satellites. But it didn't matter. Because now, across space, millions of human voices sang louder. And the story they told wasn't clean. It was raw. It was hard. It was human. And no one would ever rewrite it again. Not without a fight. Not without being remembered for what they tried to erase. The war had ended. But humanity didn't forgive. Remembered. And that was enough to keep the stars burning bright with the truth.